What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you what is likely to be my final Rogue Trader video for the alpha. Obviously, we'll have a lot more to cover when the beta drops and we can get into more specific things, but I thought I'd leave it off on some things I would like to see improved, though that obviously bears some qualifications at the beginning of the video. For starters, Owlcat took down a survey a few weeks after the alpha went up, after everyone had a chance to play it, so a lot of this feedback has already been given to them, plus you can also report bugs directly in game, that kind of stuff. So no worries there, but the other thing here is that alpha inherently means not finished, and along with the alpha access, they passed along a sort of companion information packet that had some info about things that weren't finished, things they were still actively developing, that kind of thing. So a lot of that stuff doesn't really bear a mention because obviously it needs to be improved, which in particular has a lot to do with the space combat, for instance, and then obviously things like character creation haven't been fully implemented yet, that kind of stuff. So with this video, I wanted to talk about a few things that are outside of that realm that I think could stand to see some improvements, or at least convey them to my audience as, again, kind of already passed this stuff along. Now, first and foremost, we have a relatively minor thing, and it does involve space travel. However, this strikes me as a deliberate decision as opposed to a work in progress, and that is that oftentimes you simply don't know where you're going. Now, when you're navigating the world map, there's elements of exploration to it, that kind of thing, but in regards to even main quests, it's very often that you simply don't know where you need to go, but rather you know the name of the system you need to find, and beyond that you're kind of just meandering aimlessly hoping to find it. And personally, I found that to be probably the biggest drag on the main experience, and of course after you find them the first time you'll know where it is for subsequent playthroughs, but this is something I can see being very annoying to a lot of people for their first time through. So I'd really like to see some iteration on this, either revealing the location of the places you need to get to for the main quest, or potentially just showing you the area they likely are, which I think would fit in with the story a bit better, but it was certainly a bit of a pain point for me. Now that brings us to my next point, which is itemization. Now this is one of those things I think you could make an argument about it being alpha for, but I didn't see any notes on this in particular, so I thought I would talk about it in depth a little bit, and that is that itemization as it stands is very basic. Now, going forward, I would of course expect them to add things like various unique equipment with interesting effects, that type of stuff, but as it stands, the gear you start the alpha with is about as good as it's gonna get, as everything else you find is either worse or comparable. Upgrades for all of your characters are few and far between, and basically everything is very simple renditions of items, say various types of armor or basic weapons, which makes the itemization side of combat feel pretty boring, because it tends to be dominated by whatever just happens to work the best, which is, at the moment, pretty much flamers or grenades. Both of those are very effective. Now, while that might sound like a relatively simple problem, I have to introduce you to, I would say, the secondary issue caused by this. You see, inventory works a little strangely in this game because you're dealing with the world as a rogue trader, and a lot of the loot you find actually gets sent to your ship's cargo holds. So you'll find various bits of gear as you travel through. However, you're going to find a ton of it, and it all gets sent to your cargo hold and organized, and you can access and use those or get any gear you sent there on accident. But the intention for this is that once you have specific types of gear accumulated in a piece of cargo, you can then go sell it. And while this part of the system is still in flux, what this really leads to is just an influx of mostly useless gear that you are cataloging and tracking for little purpose because it doesn't do your team hardly any good at all. So going forward, what I think would be my potential solution for this, though they may have something more elegant in the works already, I would consider dividing this up between cargo hold loot, which might be more basic everyday items, and then having the actual items your characters will equip be a separate type of item. That way I'm not carrying around like 30 types of one weapon just because it's all going to the cargo hold. And I think that would be a simple way to solve the problem of picking up tons of loot and none of it being useful. But either way, whether it's that or some other solution, there's a lot of room for improvement there, because right now it doesn't feel great. And even if you were to add more unique items to the situation, it really wouldn't solve the other half with the cargo hold. And then the last point I really want to make for this video has to do with combat. Now, for the most part, as part of my combat overview video that I did, I enjoyed combat quite a bit. If you want the details, you can go check out that video. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of it here, but while I enjoy the combat, you tend to be vastly outnumbered. And the problem with this is that a lot of those enemies are cannon fodder, but they take their turns individually, and having to wait for them in turn-based really slows down the experience. So honestly, any improvements that could be made to speeding turn-based up would go a long way, but in this particular instance, we've seen a few examples of ways to approach this elsewhere, with the simplest solution just being a speed-up option. In the case of large groups of cannon fodder enemies that don't really do much, I think the implementation of something like Swarm AI goes a long way, where they basically all take their turn at the same time, provided they're near each other with the initiative order, because currently it really drags out combat waiting for these guys, and I think some kind of addressing of this issue needs to happen, even if it's just adding a speed up timer or simply cutting the number of these cannon fodder enemies that are bogging combat down, because it simply doesn't add much to the experience. That said though, in spite of even these things, I do think the alpha for Rogue Trader is pretty solid, and I'm looking forward to seeing the improvements they make between now and beta when we cover it in even more detail, as we of course head towards the launch whenever that happens to be. And while there's really not much more for me to cover as far as the alpha goes, outside of things that would just be outright spoiling it, once the beta drops, we'll be going over basically everything available, character creation, details, the math, system details, things like that. But in the meantime, that is going to do it, so I certainly hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know how you feel about it down in the comments section below, and by all means let me know the kind of information you're looking for when the beta drops, or just more information about the game in general drops, as I'll be sure to keep it in mind going forward. But regardless, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.